Don't ignore this psalm, not because it's famous, not because it's comforting at first, but because this psalm speaks to people who are holding on by a thread. If your strength feels thin, if your faith feels stretched, if you're still standing but barely, don't ignore this psalm. There are moments in life when everything looks fine on the outside, but inside you're exhausted. You wake up tired. You pray, but the words feel heavy. You believe in God, but you're not sure how much longer you can endure. This is not rebellion. This is not weakness. This is what it feels like when someone is holding on by a thread. And Psalm 66 was written for moments exactly like this. Psalm 66 is not gentle at the beginning. It does not deny pain. It does not skip suffering. It does not pretend faith is easy. Instead, it tells the truth. God allows pressure. God allows testing. God allows moments where you feel trapped. But, and this is the turning point, He does not abandon you there. Shout for joy to God, all the earth. Sing the glory of His name. Give Him glorious praise. Before the psalm talks about pain, it starts with praise. Not because life is perfect, but because God is still God even when you're holding on by a thread. Come and see what God has done. He is awesome in His deeds toward the children of man. Now listen carefully. This psalm is about remembering what God has done before, when you're struggling to believe what He's doing now, because when fear grows, memory fades. For you, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried. You brought us into the net. You laid a crushing burden on our backs. This is the part most people skip, but you shouldn't, because the Bible does not hide this truth. Faith can feel heavy. The psalm says crushing burden, not light inconvenience, not mild discomfort. Crushing, this is what anxiety feels like. This is what prolonged stress feels like. This is what waiting for answers feels like. Bills, health, family pressure, silent prayers. You love God, but you feel trapped, like someone who is holding on by a thread. And the psalm does not shame you for that. You let men ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water. Fire burns, water drowns. Different pain, same exhaustion, different situations, same feeling. How much longer, Lord? Take a breath here, because if this psalm stopped now, it would be unbearable. But it doesn't stop here, and neither does your story. Yet you have brought us out to a place of abundance. Read that again. Yet, one word, one turn, one shift. Fire was not the end. Water was not the end. Pressure was not the end. Holding on by a thread was not the end. If this psalm found you today, it's because God is reminding you what feels like delay is not denial. What feels like silence is not absence. And what feels like the last thread is still enough for God to hold you. There are moments when survival feels spiritual, not victory, not joy, just survival. Waking up is already an act of faith. Breathing is already a prayer. And if that's where you are right now, this psalm is still speaking to you. Psalm 66 does something rare. It admits that God allows pressure, but it also reveals why pressure is not pointless. For you, O God, have tested us. You have refined us like silver. Silver is not destroyed by fire. It is revealed by it. And that distinction matters, because when you are holding on by a thread, it feels like something is ending, but Scripture says something else is happening. Testing does not mean abandonment. Refining does not mean rejection. God is not punishing you. He is not distant from you. He is closer than you realize, especially in seasons that feel unbearable. Pressure is not proof that God left. Sometimes it's proof that he stayed. Today, pressure doesn't always come as persecution. It comes as endless responsibility, financial uncertainty, mental exhaustion, fear of making the wrong decision, quiet anxiety no one sees. You still function, you still smile, but inside, you're holding on by a thread. Psalm 66 understands that. Notice what the psalm does not say. It doesn't say, you escaped by your own strength. It says, you brought us out. Deliverance is not self-generated. Relief is not self-manufactured. God does the bringing. Your job is not to escape. Your job is to endure just enough. This is where many people lose hope, because God's timing feels slow. When you're exhausted, waiting feels cruel. When answers don't come. But Scripture reveals something quiet and powerful. God does not rush refinement, and he does not forget the ones being refined. I will come into your house with burnt offerings. I will perform my vows to you. This is not negotiation. This is not bargaining. This is the voice of someone who survived pressure and didn't lose faith, not because it was easy, but because God was faithful. You don't need dramatic faith right now. You don't need strong emotions. You don't need perfect prayers. You need honest endurance. Faith that whispers instead of shouts. Faith that breathes instead of sings. Faith that says, I'm still here, God. That is enough. When you're holding on by a thread, this psalm reminds you, a thread is still connection. A thread is still contact. A thread is still enough for God to hold. He does not require more strength than you have. He meets you where you are. Psalm 66 does not promise a life without pressure. It promises something deeper. Pressure will not have the final word. Fire will not erase you. Water will not drown what God is preserving. You will come out, not unchanged, but alive. Let that settle, because the next part of this psalm reveals something most people miss. What God hears when you pray from exhaustion. And there comes a point when prayer changes, not because God changes, but because you are tired. Words become shorter. Silence becomes longer. Sometimes all you can offer is a breath, or a thought, or a tear. And many people wonder, does God still hear me? When I pray like this, Psalm 66 answers that question quietly, but clearly. But truly God has listened. He has attended to the voice of my prayer. Notice what it says. Not the perfect prayer. Not the confident prayer. Not the eloquent prayer. It says, the voice of my prayer. Even when that voice trembles, even when it breaks, even when it barely comes out. This is something people rarely talk about. God does not turn away because your faith feels thin. He does not ignore you because you're holding on by a thread. In fact, Scripture suggests the opposite. The weaker the prayer, the closer his attention. In today's world, many prayers look like this: driving in silence, lying awake at night, sitting alone with your phone off, whispering, "Help me," under your breath. These moments may not look spiritual, but heaven recognizes them. Psalm 66 confirms, God is listening. If I had cherished iniquity in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. This verse is often misunderstood. It is not about perfection. It is not about never failing. It is about honesty. God listens to broken hearts, not hidden ones. He listens to exhaustion, not pretension. You don't need to impress God. You don't need to explain everything perfectly. You need to be real. If you're angry, say it. If you're confused, admit it. If you're tired, don't hide it. God does not withdraw from honesty. He withdraws from masks. When you're holding on by a thread, pretending strength only drains you faster. Psalm 66 invites you to lay the mask down, because God is not waiting for your strength. He is responding to your truth. But truly God has listened. That sentence matters. It means heaven is not silent. It means your prayers are not wasted. It means endurance is not invisible. Even if nothing has changed yet, something has been heard. God's silence is not absence. It is often preparation. Waiting does not mean neglect. It means timing is still unfolding. Psalm 66 was written after the fire, after the water, after the pressure, and only then did the meaning become clear. If you're still holding on by a thread today, this psalm is reminding you, God hears the prayers you think don't count. He listens to the faith that feels unfinished, and He is already at work in ways you cannot see yet. Stay here for a moment, because the next part of this psalm reveals what changes inside you before anything changes around you. And that shift matters more than you think. Most people think peace comes after the answer, after the problem is solved, after the door opens, after the burden lifts. But Psalm 66 reveals something quieter. Peace often arrives before anything changes, not in circumstances, but inside you. Psalm 66 does not rush into celebration. Instead, it slows down. It shows a heart that has passed through pressure and now speaks differently. Not louder, not prouder, calmer. That calm is not denial. It is recognition. God has listened. God is present. God is working, even unseen. If you've been holding on by a thread, this moment may feel familiar. The problem is still there, but your breathing changes. Your thoughts slow. Your shoulders relax. Just a little. Nothing external shifted, yet something inside did. That is not imagination. That is God. Blessed be God, because He has not rejected my prayer or removed His steadfast love from me. This is not relief yet. This is assurance. The psalmist knows. Whatever comes next, God's love did not leave. This matters deeply because many people believe that unanswered prayer equals rejection. Psalm 66 dismantles that lie. God can delay an answer without withdrawing His love. Waiting is not abandonment. Holding on by a thread is not failure. When you're holding on by a thread, the enemy whispers, God has forgotten you. Psalm 66 responds, He has not removed His steadfast love. That love remains, even when clarity doesn't. You don't need to resolve everything today. You don't need to see the full picture. You need one thing, the assurance that God is still near. And that assurance changes how you wait. Rest is not always sleep. Sometimes it's the end of panic. Sometimes it's the ability to say, I don't understand, but I trust. That kind of rest is what Psalm 66 is shaping inside you. If peace is beginning to surface, even faintly, don't dismiss it. It is often the first sign that God has already responded. Even if the situation hasn't moved yet, stay with this feeling, because the next part of this psalm reveals what praise looks like after survival. Not loud, not dramatic, but deeply real. There's a kind of praise that only comes after survival, not the praise of excitement, not the praise of victory, the praise of someone who made it through when they thought they wouldn't. Psalm 66 carries that tone. Quiet, grounded, real. I will tell what is done for my soul. Notice what is missing. There is no exaggeration, no performance, no spectacle, just testimony. God didn't just fix a situation, He sustained a soul. In modern life, people expect testimonies to sound dramatic, but some of the deepest ones sound like this. I didn't quit. I didn't give up. I'm still here. When you were holding on by a thread, that survival itself became praise. When you're holding on by a thread, God is not measuring your volume. He is honoring your endurance. Psalm 66 validates that kind of faith. The psalmist looks back, not to relive pain, but to recognize faithfulness. Memory becomes worship, because remembering what God did strengthens trust for what He will do next. Sometimes you avoid looking back because it reminds you of fear, but Psalm 66 invites you to look back with new eyes, not as a victim, but as someone who survived. I cried to Him with my mouth, and high praise was on my tongue. Even the cry became praise, not because pain disappeared, but because God remained present within it. This matters deeply. God does not require polished praise. He receives sincere praise, praise that trembles, praise that whispers, praise that comes from exhaustion. That kind of praise is not weak. It is honest. If you're still here today, still breathing, still praying, still hoping, Psalm 66 is already speaking through you. Your endurance is testimony. Your survival is worship. Stay with this truth, because the next part of this psalm shows how endurance becomes confidence and how faith begins to look forward again. Carefully, slowly, honestly. Confidence does not return all at once. After pressure, faith moves carefully. It takes small steps. It tests the ground. Psalm 66 reflects that kind of trust. Not reckless, not loud, restored but gentle. The psalmist does not say, I believe because everything is fixed. He believes because he remembers who carried him through. Confidence is no longer theory. It is memory. When you've been holding on by a thread, you don't need big promises. You need steady presence. God becomes trustworthy, not because life got easier, but because He stayed when it was hard. When you're holding on by a thread, trust grows from what you survived. Psalm 66 builds confidence from endurance, not comfort. There's a shift in the psalm. It looks forward again, not with bold declarations, but with quiet assurance. God will continue. God will provide. God will remain. Maybe you stop dreaming. Maybe you stop planning. Not because you lack faith, but because disappointment hurt. Psalm 66 does not rush you back. It invites you to trust again, slowly. Hope does not mean ignoring pain. It means believing pain is not permanent. That belief grows gently when God proves Himself faithful in silence. If trust is returning in pieces, don't rush it. God rebuilds faith with patience, not pressure. Stay here, because the next part of this psalm reveals how confidence turns into courage and how faith moves from surviving to stepping forward again. There's a moment when faith shifts, not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly. You don't feel strong yet, but you no longer feel paralyzed. Psalm 66 reaches that moment, the point where survival turns into movement. Courage in Scripture is often misunderstood. It is not the absence of fear. It is movement despite fear. The psalmist speaks now with a steadier heart, not because danger vanished, but because God proved himself present. When you've been holding on by a thread, courage doesn't look heroic. It looks like making one decision, taking one step, saying one honest prayer. Try again, carefully. That is real courage. When you're holding on by a thread, God does not demand leaps. He invites steps. Psalm 66 honors movement that is slow, but sincere. Come and hear, all you who fear God, and I will tell what he has done for my soul. This is no longer internal. Faith begins to speak outwardly, not to boast, but to strengthen others. You may think your story is small, but someone else is where you were. Someone else is holding on by a thread and wondering if survival is possible. Your quiet testimony becomes their courage. Notice what the psalm does not do. It does not rush. It does not command speed. It invites listening. It invites reflection. God does not hurry healing. He walks it. If you feel courage returning, even faintly, pay attention. It is often the sign that God is inviting you forward. Not fast, but faithfully. Stay here for a moment, because the next part of this psalm reveals what changes in how you see God after everything you've endured, and that change reshapes everything. Suffering changes how you see things, not immediately, not intentionally, but inevitably. After walking through pressure, you don't see God the same way you did before. Psalm 66 reflects this shift. God is no longer just powerful. He is personal. Before the fire, God was known by stories. After the fire, God is known by experience. The psalmist no longer speaks about God. He speaks from God's faithfulness. This is what pain clarifies. When you're holding on by a thread, your faith matures. It stops asking only why. It starts trusting who. You may not understand the process, but you know the one who walked you through it. When you're holding on by a thread, your image of God shifts, not smaller, stronger. Psalm 66 reshapes faith. From theory into relationship, the psalm reveals a God who listens, a God who refines, a God who restores. Not a distant judge, not a silent observer, but a present companion. In pressure, you trust differently. When you walk with God through pain, you don't fear his silence the same way. You don't panic as quickly, because you've learned silence is not absence. After endurance, faith becomes simpler, less performance, less explanation, more trust, more rest. Psalm 66 shows a faith that no longer needs to be loud to be real. If your faith feels quieter now, don't mistake that for weakness. It may be maturity. It may be depth. It may be the strongest form of belief you've ever known. Stay with this understanding, because the next part of this psalm reveals what changes in how you see yourself. After God carries you through fire, and that realization is powerful, survival leaves a mark. not visible, not dramatic, but real. After walking through pressure, you don't return to who you were before. Psalm 66 reveals this quietly. The psalmist speaks now from a changed place. The voice in this psalm is not the voice of someone untouched. It is the voice of someone refined. Fire did not consume him. Water did not erase him. Instead, endurance reshaped him. When you're holding on by a thread, you discover something unexpected. Strength does not always feel powerful. Sometimes it feels calm. Sometimes it feels steady. Sometimes it feels quiet confidence. Psalm 66 reflects that strength. When you're holding on by a thread, you may feel weak, but surviving what you survived means something inside you is stronger than you think. Psalm 66 honors that transformation. The psalmist no longer speaks from desperation. He speaks from awareness. He knows what God can do because he has lived through it. That knowledge changes identity. You may return to the same job, the same house, the same routine, but you return different. Fear no longer controls you the same way. Waiting no longer terrifies you the same way, because you know now, God carried you once. He can carry you again. Psalm 66 does not rush self-definition. It simply stands in truth. I am someone God sustained. That is enough. If you sense that something inside you changed, even subtly, don't ignore it. That change is evidence. That pressure did not win. Stay here, because the next part of this psalm reveals how identity turns into purpose and how surviving becomes something that serves others. There is a moment when survival stops being only personal. Pain begins to speak outward, not loudly, not forcefully, but meaningfully. Psalm 66 reaches this stage, the place where endurance turns into purpose. The psalmist did not choose suffering to gain wisdom. He did not seek pressure to build testimony. Purpose emerged after pain, not before it. This matters because it means your hardest seasons were not wasted. When you've been holding on by a thread, your story becomes a bridge. Others may not listen to advice, but they listen to survival. They trust scars more than theories. Psalm 66 models this kind of purpose. When you're holding on by a thread, you may feel like nothing good is coming from this. Psalm 66 gently corrects that thought. What sustained you will soon strengthen someone else. Come and hear, all you who fear God, and I will tell what he has done for my soul. This is invitation, not instruction. The psalmist does not command. He opens space. Purpose speaks best when it is offered, not forced. You don't need a platform. You don't need perfect words. Sometimes purpose looks like listening to someone else, saying, I understand, sitting with another person's pain, sharing quiet hope. This is how faith multiplies. Psalm 66 does not glorify suffering. It honors what God does through it. Purpose is not pain itself. Purpose is redemption. If you feel drawn to help others because of what you survived, pay attention. That pull is not accidental. It is the fruit of endurance. Stay with this realization, because the next part of this psalm reveals what happens when purpose meets humility and how God keeps you grounded. After everything you've walked through, after survival, after insight, after purpose, there is still something essential left. Humility. Psalm 66 never shifts into pride. The psalmist remembers how close he came to breaking, and that memory keeps him grounded. If I had cherished iniquity in my heart, the Lord would not have listened. This is not self-accusation. It is awareness. The psalmist understands that grace is not earned. God listened not because he deserved it, but because God is merciful. When you're holding on by a thread, you learn something powerful. You are not self-sufficient. And that realization is not shameful. It is freeing because it keeps you close to God. When you're holding on by a thread, humility becomes survival wisdom. Psalm 66 shows that dependence is not weakness. It is alignment. The psalmist does not say, "Look what I overcame." He says, "Look what God sustained." That shift matters because pride disconnects. Humility keeps faith alive. Even after healing, you walk carefully, not in fear, but in reverence. Psalm 66 reflects a heart that knows how fragile faith can feel without God's presence. Humility is not the end of the journey. It is what keeps the journey open. It keeps prayer honest. It keeps worship real. It keeps trust alive. If humility feels natural to you now, that is not loss. That is growth. It means pressure taught you what comfort never could. If you stayed until now, it's not by accident. Something in this psalm met you where you are, because Psalm 66 is not about escaping pain. It is about discovering that pain was not the end. When you were holding on by a thread, it felt fragile, thin, unreliable, but now you see something clearly. That thread never snapped, because it wasn't just your strength. It was God holding the other end. You know now, pressure did not destroy you. Silence did not mean abandonment. Waiting did not erase God's love. Survival was not meaningless. Psalm 66 taught you this, not by explanation, but by experience. If life tightens again, if fear returns, if strength feels thin, come back to this psalm. Because when you're holding on by a thread, this psalm reminds you, God refines, God listens, God sustains, God brings you out. You don't need to respond loudly, but if this psalm spoke to you, if you recognize yourself in these words, take a moment, write a simple comment. I'm still holding on. That one sentence may be the encouragement someone else needs tonight. Wherever you are, whatever you're carrying, may the peace of God meet you there, and may you remember, even a thread is enough when God is holding you.